Yeah, I mean, I just so a couple of weeks ago, just to kind of fill us in, a couple of weeks ago, I downloaded and installed 1104, Ubuntu 1104, and I also put it on my netbook as well. I put it on the at first I only put it on the netbook, and I was playing around with it, and then I realised that I wasn't using the netbook enough to get a really fair kind of reflection of what it's like. Because one thing that you'll know, particularly about me, is when I review something, I like to do it as I would use if I was going to use this full time as my main desktop. I want to know what it's like.
Yeah, I think we both do that, right? We install it on hardware and then we use it for a few weeks.
If I could install it in VirtualBox and play with it for 10 minutes and then come out with a load of opinions about it.
Everybody can do that.
But what's the point in that? You've got to actually use it on the hardware and use it full time. Otherwise, you don't get a fair reflection of what's going on. So before we start, one thing I did want to say is that I haven't particularly used GNOME 3 with any kind of real conviction yet. So I'm going to do that next. So it may be that some of the things that I don't like about Unity are also the same in GNOME 3. It might just be that
we'll
it's
come
different.
back to that then and talk about that.
Yeah, I'll come back to that in future. But I just thought I'd say that up front. And also, the test hardware that I've got this on isn't the newest of machines. It's the original Dell M1330. So it's, I think, 2 gig of RAM. It's got like a Centrino Core 2 Duo processor. I think it's about 2 gig dual core. So I mean, it's not a slow machine, but it's not like the latest of machines. In case anybody wants to check, I'll put a link to the specs or whatever. We can probably do that in the show notes, or so you can find them. Just Google the M1330, Dell M1330. So yeah, I installed 1104, and the install was pretty much the same as it had always been. You know, the Ubiquity thing. One thing I did find interesting was when I booted up the live CD or live USB stick as I ended up installing it, it took me into a normal GNOME desktop, Ubuntu GNOME desktop, as it would have been in the last release. And on the desktop was an icon saying install 1104. And I couldn't work out where that would be at first. I was thinking, well, why is it not using Unity? And then I thought maybe it's because my NVIDIA card uses the horrible binary drivers, and I obviously that doesn't come on the CD with Ubuntu. It does have the thing that pops up saying you can install restricted drivers, but you have to opt in. They can't automatically make a choice on the restricted driver for you. And I presume the Nouveau drivers and open drivers for the NVIDIA aren't up to a level where it works. I don't know. But anyway, I found that quite strange because I booted it up and I got this GNOME desktop and I thought, oh, this doesn't look any different, well, much different to the last Ubuntu. And then when I installed it, after I'd installed it, when I booted it again, then I got the Unity desktop, which was interesting. Very different. So that's something to keep an eye out for. Interestingly, on the netbook, which has an Intel graphics card, which has open drivers, it did from the from the live boot, it did have the Unity desktop, so it must be a 3D graphics driver issue that they can't use it without, because it seems to rely very heavily on compers. I've kind of given enough plugs for Floss Weekly, but on the last Floss Weekly, we talked to Sam Spilsbury, who's the maintainer of compers at the moment, and he's actually employed by Canonical now to help out with their desktop stuff and Unity specifically. So when you use Unity, you do get the feeling that it's like the desktop. This is something Dick Turpin was telling me the other day. He thinks it's just like the desktop wall in Unity, you know, like the switching of desktops.
You mean in Compass?
Compass, sorry, yeah. You get the Unity ones like the old Compass desktop wall switching stuff, which I suppose it is when you're switching desktops. But anyway, so it uses a lot of 3D stuff, as you would imagine. So I got some points to make. Actually, performance was the first thing I was going to come to. I've mentioned this isn't the newest of hardware, and it uses a lot of 3D acceleration and stuff in the desktop. But I've got to say, performance-wise, I've been really impressed by the actual responsiveness of the Unity desktop. I haven't had any slowdowns or clicking a menu and waiting 2 minutes for it to pop up or any of that, which I kind of expected, having used the earlier versions, which were really, really buggy of Unity. So I think they've done a really good job of squashing the bugs in that area. So performance is actually quite good, even on this old machine. I've already mentioned the Compass links and stuff. So I think they must have put a lot of a lot of effort into getting all those bugs squashed. Maybe Jono's blog posts had the desired effect after all.
I think they put a lot of effort in that.
Yeah, it seems like it. I mean, and there are some good things that I like about the Unity interface. This kind of menu that they've got now in the top left corner when you click it, it's kind of like it's a bit more like using GNOME Do or something like that. You click it and it brings up a big text box, and you start typing in what you're looking for, and then it brings up a list of either files or application launchers or whatever it might be. So if I open this and start typing Fire, you're not going to see this on the screen. It comes up with Firefox, obviously, because it says, oh, you want to use Firefox. But that is actually really quick and very responsive, actually. I was surprised because I expected it to be slow as hell. And it's not. It's actually pretty good. So I've got to give them credit for that. I like that. There are lots of things that I didn't like. We'll get to those in a minute. So that's one cool thing I quite liked about it. The search stuff, the desktop search and all that's quite cool. But moving on to usability, this is something I've struggled with, really. It may be something to do with the way that I work traditionally. I kind of like a traditional desktop with a list of what windows are open, always on the screen.
Just so old-fashioned.
Yeah, well, I like to know what's open. You know,
I'm using XFCE right now. I get where it coming from.
Yeah. Well, for instance, like right now on my screen, I'm looking at I've got Firefox open and I'm looking at our notes for this show that we use while we're doing it, the show as a kind of a running order. And what it does is it kind of pushes. It's almost like looking at it in full screen, because all you get is a little thin bar across the top where your clock and your Wi-Fi stuff and like your volume setting and all that kind of stuff is. And then they've got this universal menu which is then pushed into that top bit. Yeah, that gets pushed into the top bit. And when it first, as I said, I've never used. I've never used a Mac. I've used one for about 10 minutes in my whole life, and I know nothing about the Mac interface. So this universal menu business is all completely new to me. But I was using, I forget what the program was. I think it was Audacity. I was using Audacity or something like that. And the universal menu, only appears when you scroll over it. So you have to scroll up to the top to get the menu to pop up, because it switches with the title of the title of the window. So right now I've got, my Mozilla Firefox, and the address and stuff is in the title as you would normally get it at the top of the window.
Why?
And when I scroll over it, it switches from that to the menu, which at first I took me a long time to work out. I couldn't work out where the menus were until I accidentally scrolled over it and went, oh, is that a menu? And then I worked out what was going on.
Okay, I don't want to really take you off your train here. Just very quickly, just interject my opinion on the universal menu, right? File edit. The stuff that's in that application menu, whatever you call it, belongs to the app.
Yeah,
it belongs in the window because it belongs to the app. It doesn't belong on the other end of the screen. It belongs into the window, like the window title. It belongs in the window.
Yeah. You better make sure it doesn't explode there. So one thing I find very strange is when you're in full screen, when you've got a maximized, not full screen, when you've got an app kind of maximized, at least it makes some sense to have the thing at the top there. It feels a bit like it's part of the window. But when you're running windows that just smaller, that fit in on the desktop, you have to switch between the menus. You have to select, and you have to be focused. The menu changes depending on which app is in focus, if that makes sense. So if I'm using Pigeon and I've got the little Pigeon toolbox open and I scroll up to the top of the screen, I get the Pigeon file, edit, whatever menu. And if there's another app open on the screen as well, which is alongside Pigeon, I have to click on that so that's in focus, and then go up to the top to get the menu for that. So that's the one that's kind of active, if you like. I don't really like that. It doesn't suit the way I work, as I said. Maybe it suits other people better. It doesn't really do it for me. So that I've had problem with. There's like a dock on the left which pops up when you kind of scroll over it. That's like it's kind of like the docky thing that you would get with what's his face, GNOME Do again. So you've got shortcuts on there, and you can pin things onto it, and you can set up which apps you want on there. You've got a desktop switcher as well, which gives you 4 desktops. And they're in a kind of a square, so you have to go left and then down and then right and stuff like that. To move around them, you can't go. You can't put them like the GNOME 3 one you were saying is in a stack, so they're all up and down. These are all kind of in a cube almost, so you go you have to rotate around there. The file searching and stuff, as I said, is pretty cool. Filtering stuff, all of the little, like when you click on your applications to see what applications you've got, you can filter through them quite nicely. And the other thing it does, which I quite like, is it will suggest applications. It's got like 3 categories. So I click on my applications tab and I've got most frequently used, which is obvious. And then I've got like a tab for like a list for the ones that I've got installed. And at the bottom I've got apps available for download, which is like ones that I might like. Which is interesting.
Yeah, I really like that feature. I heard about that. They talked about it on Ubuntu UK.
Yeah.
Because apparently somebody was offended that it was like offering like, I don't know,
proprietary software.
There was a title that wasn't like child safe or something silly like that.
Wow.
There was like
G-Naughty.
No, it wasn't as bad as that, but it was like it had like, I don't know. No, it wasn't as bad. It just wasn't like it had penis in the name or something.
Right. Okay.
It wasn't called The Shaft.
Yeah.
But yeah, really silly. But I thought that was a really cool feature. Like that, they were talking about having that in GNOME 3, and I thought that would have been really cool.
Yeah, it's a good idea.
I mean, GNOME 3 had the thing where you put in like you start typing the name, and it suggests like apps. So it should also suggest apps that aren't installed. I think that would be awesome.
Yeah, that would be very cool. Well, obviously, because the main kind of the GNOME 2 menus that we would expect, like applications and system and places and all that stuff that you would expect, are no longer there because they're not in use at the moment. What they've done is they've moved onto the right hand side where you have the little I don't even know what that area is called. You have that area where you can choose to shut the machine down and change your session and log out and all that kind of stuff on the little drop down on the very right. At the bottom of that, you've got a new option called System Settings, and when you click on that, it brings up the Control Center thing, which is more like Mint, I suppose, in a way, or Yast. I've compared it a little bit to Yast. It's more like a traditional control panel thing rather than having your menus that you would get.
Yeah, GNOME 3 has that as well. It's like KDE, basically. You know, the KDE.
Yeah, K Control, or I forget what it's called. Yeah,
yeah, Control with a K.
Control, yeah. Makes sense. So, yeah, that's not bad. I mean, I don't have any problem with that. Works quite well. As I've said, one thing I find quite annoying is the list of kind of open windows is on the dock, and when you're not, if you're using an application, the dock disappears off the screen because it wants to give you more screen space. So it disappears off the screen, and you can't immediately see what apps you've got open. So in order to know what you've got open, you have to kind of bring that up, or as I've been doing a lot, kind of alt tabbing, which makes me feel like I'm on Windows 3.0. So I kind of alt tab between the apps.
You'll have
that are
the
open.
same. Yeah, you'll have the same problem with GNOME 3 as well.
I suspect
the thing they have in common is they don't have that taskbar thing. Which is, yeah, I get where they're coming from, and as I said, I think it's productive if you, it's good for new users, it is, but as a power user, it's just, suboptimal.
So I've been doing a lot of that kind of alt tabbing and stuff, and I see Popey's pinging me messages about like links to things about how you can change the behavior. I'm sure you can change all this stuff, but the point is, this is how it works when people install it and get it out of the box. So. Yeah. This is how they're going to use it. Most average users are not going to start looking into how they can hack the config and stuff. I'm sure we can do that, but and the other thing is, I mean, I should say, to be fair, this is like the first full desktop release of Unity, so it's going to take them a while to get up to speed. But what was I going to say? Yeah, so that's quite interesting that it's all on the dock and stuff, and you have to kind of alt tab. And I have occasionally kind of, when I first started using it, I kind of lost some windows, and I'm like trying to find them by alt tabbing and working out which desktop I put them on, which workspace I put them on, and stuff like that, which is not ideal. But as I said, a lot of this is probably to do with the fact that I don't usually work that way, so it may be.
Yeah, I found this really interesting. I don't know if you followed this, but like this goes right into this. Like on Jono's blog, basically announced Ubuntu now has a power user team.
Yeah, I saw that. What's that about?
I was going on that. I was like, Ubuntu is the only Linux distribution that like needs a power user team. I mean, this was something I was saying 2 years ago when they started messing with all this shit. I was saying, like, you know, they're going away from catering to the users that made Ubuntu what it is, right? They're going away from the power users.
Well, yeah,
which
I mean,
we all are. All the people that are listening to the show are.
I would, yeah, definitely.
And they need a team for that.
The reason for that is because if they do seriously want 200 million users, there isn't 200 million users who are like that. You know, they're going to need to get the average Joe in the street to use it if they want 200 million people to use it. But anyway, so moving on.
Yeah, the question is that I'm beginning to ask myself, seeing what it turns into to get that goal. The thing I'm asking myself, is it worth it?
Yeah, well, right? I suppose that's something that.
I mean, it's free software and everything. That's great, but you know, it gets less and less interesting to me. Maybe I'm just an egoistical bastard.
Maybe. So moving on, that's kind of usability pretty much covered. For me, this is all personal as well. As I said, this is what I found coming from a very strict kind of traditional desktop background. A big point that I wanted to make, and I know a lot of people agree with this, is the accessibility, the complete lack of accessibility features, which has taken a backseat in this release. Things like the screen reader integration and stuff like that, which people have spent a long time developing in GNOME. It's gonna be a massive job to get that up to speed, and I don't know if the appetite is there from Canonical and other people to really make that work. I mean, to be fair to them, everything that I've heard from the people inside Canonical, I've heard them come out and say, you know, accessibility is really important to us. We're going to fix it, etc., etc. Great. I really hope they do. I think it's sad that they've cut off a lot of people who rely on those accessibility things.
I mean, that's an issue with the rest, right? This causes so much duplication. You know, we said they fixed a lot of the bugs they had, but if you see what kind of work that was, I mean, it's great that you have, we said them before, it's great that you have choice, but you think of all that work, if they had pulled that with GNOME 3,
yeah, I mean, there is that argument. I think the kind of the impression I got from using Unity for the last couple of weeks is that they really set themselves a massive task here. I mean, they had to literally climb a mountain to make this work and to get it to a stage where it was usable, because like 6 months ago, it was, or whatever it was, Mark came out and said, "Ooh, Unity's going to be the default desktop," and everybody went, "Is it? Shit, you know, we're going to have to make it work." So they had to do a lot of work, and to be fair to them, they've done a massive amount of work, and they've come a long way. I think maybe there is a bit further to go, but you know, I mean, it's an achievement that they've come this far. But I think what lots of people are telling me is that by the next LTS, which is 1204, I think, which is, you know, just under a year away, sorry, that they will have all this done, and I hope they do, because it would be cool to see that. But accessibility is a bit of a worry for me. I know people at Canonical have said that they want to address the accessibility issue. I hope they do, because one of the things, when I seem to be talking about Floss Weekly all the time, I apologise, but when I was on Floss Weekly last time, or the week before, we talked about Unity and so on, and I mentioned the fact that there was a lack of accessibility features, and I got emails from people saying thank you for mentioning it, because nobody seems asked, you know, like nobody seems interested. So if we don't keep this in focus, then I think it's a danger. So that's something they could definitely improve on. Switching
definitely.
back,
and if you need these features and you have any reports on that, definitely mail us. We always want, Dan and me, we don't, you know, we can see, we can hear, we're very lucky that way, so we can't, it's kind of hard to test. So if you also about GNOME 3, I'd be really interested how GNOME 3 stacks up, right? In that department. I think that's really important.
Yeah, definitely.
Do you think all that effort is worth it? I mean, I have this thing where I think, I mean, this is very controversial, but of course, Unity being a canonical project has the copyright assignment, right?
Yeah. And
this seems to me like, I was thinking about this this morning in the shower, where I think about stuff a lot. And I was like thinking, it looks like to me that they did a little bit what Google did with Android, or they're trying to get there. They have a Linux kernel, and then they have lots of userland on top, which is open source and is free software, but which they own all the copyrights to, and could take proprietary any minute. I mean, Google could do that. That's what they're doing with Android, right? They're not releasing Honeycomb. So Yeah, I worry about these things.
Yeah, I can see that. I can see, yeah, that it is a bit of a worry. I mean, there's a little bit more I want to cover before summing up on Unity and so on. Switching back, this is something that I was interested in. How easy would it be to, say I can't work at all with Unity and I don't like it and I just want my GNOME desktop back. How do I do that? And there is an Ubuntu, what they call an Ubuntu Classic login.
How do I do that? Mint.com.
Yeah, but
linuxmint.com. Yeah.
The thing is to get up and this to be fair, before we get a rage of abuse from Ubuntu fans, this is probably a GNOME GDM issue. I appreciate that it could well be that, but what happens is when you load up and you go into log in, rather than having like what looks like an obvious option where you can say, oh, I'd like to use the classic interface, you have to click on your user to start typing in your password, and then a little menu pops up at the bottom, which you have to then go and click on, which has the options. And I think that's the GNOME, as I say, that might just be the GDM login stuff, may not be Ubuntu's fault at all, but it is kind of annoying that it's not easy to do. They could have put a button on there saying, click here to log in classic mode, or a button somewhere in the interface that says switch to classic mode or something.
But the thing about that is, if I understand everything correctly, that's going away in the next version anyway.
Oh, I see.
Like
well,
with
maybe
the
that's
next
why.
version, there will only be Unity, if I read all the stuff correctly.
Right. Oh, well, okay. I await that with interest.
Yeah. So, do you think it's worth it? Like for you personally, I don't know.
For me, I'm not. It's not something that I want to use particularly. But as I said, I don't think, from what I've heard, that GNOME 3 will be what I want to use either. So I might end up on XFCE. I'm not sure.
Well, we'll see about that when we see
when I've tried it. Yeah. I think. I mean, I've spent a long time really trying to get used to Unity and trying to do everything as I can full time, and I can use it. It's not unusable to me. I've got used to it, but it still feels really, really counterintuitive. After 2 weeks of full time using it, it still doesn't feel right to me. Maybe that's because I've got so much invested in knowing all the previous stuff that somebody who was newer to it might take to it easier. I personally, I wouldn't choose this over other desktops. Or I wouldn't choose it over my GNOME 2 desktop, which is what I tend to use at the moment. But as I said, whether I would choose GNOME 3 over that, I don't know either. I think they've come a long way. As I said, they set themselves a massive challenge, and they've come a long way. And I give them great credit for that. I think the performance is impressive because the previous versions had a hell of a lot of performance issues. I mean, as I mentioned before, I couldn't get it to run on a netbook for my mum who wanted to use the latest Ubuntu. The Unity interface was just terrible on the netbook for me, and that was a previous version. So I think a lot of work's gone into fixing that, which I give them credit for. Some of the things like the search stuff and the suggestion for apps that you might want to install and stuff like that, I like. One thing I didn't do, which I did mean to do, but I never really got around to, was buying into the whole Ubuntu One thing. I haven't done that yet. I may still do that and let you know what happens, because you need to sign up with an Ubuntu One account because they're trying to push the whole experience now. So I'd be interested to see how that integrates. So, I mean, they've come a long way in the challenge. I think that there's still a way to go. I suppose the bottom line for me is I thought about this morning, if there were no other desktops in the world and this was the only choice, then I could live with it. But is that really a ringing endorsement? Probably not, for me personally. I mean, it's just if I had no other choice, I would make do with it, but I wouldn't go out and choose it as a preference. Maybe that will change in future. I don't know, but we'll see. So it's not really for me. It might be for other people.
I think what I give them credit for definitely is the same thing I give GNOME 3 credit for, which is really important. I haven't tried Unity a lot. I don't think it's for me, but I give them credit for innovating, for trying something new, for having the balls to do something, which is something that Microsoft and Apple doesn't have. Like, there's nothing UI-wise, there's nothing new in Lion. Like, the only thing that Apple is doing right now is they're trying to turn their desktop into, like, iOS, and they're, like, neutering everything. You know, they're putting in an app store, taking away even more power from you. You know, at least I think this is really, I think I said this before, this is a point where we as the open source free software community are really leapfrogging proprietary software right now because we have the balls to change something. And I mean, even KDE4 started that, right?
Yeah, I mean,
and
they
whenever you do
definitely
something
try.
like that, you piss off users. But the great thing in FOSS is we have alternatives. You don't like Unity, you don't like GNOME 3, use XFC, use LXD, use OpenBox, use KDE, use whatever, use the command line. It's all good.
Yeah, I mean, I think, yeah, it is a massive change. This was something that, as you said, applies to GNOME 3 as well, and previously to what they did with KDE4. It's difficult to make a big change, a leap of faith, if you will, because you don't know if the people are going to come with you or not, or if they like what you've done. And it would be easy to sit down and just keep refining little bits of GNOME 2 and not really changing anything, which is essentially, people may not like this, but it's essentially what Microsoft do. They only ever tweak their interface very slightly. They don't. They're never going to bring out a version where the toolbar's at the top.
Doing anything.
Yeah, exactly.
Everybody keeps going on, oh, the UI is so awesome. They're not changing anything. They're just changing a gradient here and there.
Yeah, I mean, well, it's an interesting move. I think it's very brave, as I said. I think there was a lot of stuff to be done. The bottom line for me is, if I had to sum it up, this is my favorite phrase. I'm going to use this when I write about it. But at the moment, I can see that Ubuntu and Canonical have broken a lot of eggs, but I'm not convinced they've made an omelette yet. That's my kind of analogy for me personally. So we'll see. It takes a lot of learning, and you need to get used to it. But whether it's worth it for you is probably a personal choice. So I'm going to, as I said, move on to GNOME 3 and see what happens there. And as I said, we'll find out what the difference is.
I'll be interested to see you compare this stuff.
Oh, and quickly, Popey's prodding me in the IRC, I should mention. Apparently, if you use, I didn't realize this, but apparently if you use Launchpad and you have a Launchpad account, then they set up an Ubuntu One account for you, because he just told me I already have an Ubuntu One account, which I didn't even know.
That means I have one as well.
That means you must have one as well, yeah. Because
it's not useful to me on Arch, but hey.
Yeah, well, I've never used it, so who knows? We'll find out. So I might look into that, and we've also got Bradley's reminding us that Ubuntu One's proprietary, and it is. So there you go. Who knows? But, each to their own. So, hopefully that...
I like use proprietary stuff. I just use proprietary stuff that works.
Yes.
If I'm going to be evil, I'm going to be evil in style. So, Dropbox for me.
Evil in style. Yeah, so that's kind of my rough overview of Ubuntu and the latest Ubuntu, I suppose. Very quick, just a rough kind of thing. If you really want to try it out, I would say boot the live version and try it out. If you've got a graphics card that has open drivers, like an Intel graphics card, you'll get the full Unity experience with the live session. If you haven't, like me, and you've got a freedom-hating graphics card, then you may have to install it to get the proper version of Unity, so you can try it out. And and as I said, onwards to GNOME 3 in future, so I'll find out what happens with that. Should be interesting. I've got an overwhelming feeling I'm going to end up on Fluxbox or something. The way things are going, I'll just end up using Crunchbang or something, or OpenBox. Use Crunchbang instead. So I think we should probably move on to the feedback.